This is CNN Breaking News.
Good evening. I'm Erin Burnett. Out front tonight, breaking news. Kushner's Russia connection. The Washington Post and NBC News reporting moments ago that FBI investigators are now focusing on President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and meetings he had with the Russian ambassador and the head of a Russian bank that is the subject of American sanctions. The Post report says Kushner is being investigated because of, quote, the extent and nature of his interactions with the Russians. This is a big development, and it comes just days after reports that an unnamed senior White House official close to the president is a significant focus of the Russia investigation. Matt Zapotowski is the lead reporter on the Post story. He's out front tonight. And Matt, this is a stunning new development. What more can you tell us about your reporting?
It is. So last week we reported that a senior White House person was a significant person of interest in this investigation, and today we can reveal that that person is Jared Kushner. That's really important, of course, because there's almost no one closer to the president in the White House than him. He's the president's son-in-law. He's kind of the key person on a lot of their interactions with foreign countries. So this is big news. Now, I should sort of clarify that we're not saying that he is going to be charged with a crime. We're not saying he is the target of the investigation. They're certainly looking at Paul Manafort and Mike Flynn too, but sort of put Jared Kushner up in that class of people who they're interested in.
And to your point, now this is somebody, as you're saying, they're not alleging wrongdoing at this point, but they are looking closely, not just as someone who's in the White House and in the president's inner circle, but perhaps the person in that circle closest to the president.
That's right. That's right. And that's why we think that this is so significant, that even if they can't allege specific wrongdoing now, it's important for the public to know this.
And at this time, you are talking about meetings with a Russian ambassador, meetings with a Russian bank. What other developments do you know of at this time, links that Jared Kushner may have had with the Russians that they are looking at?
Well, we know in April there was an event at the Mayflower that Jared Kushner was at and Sergei Kislyak, who's the Russian ambassador, was at. We don't know if they interacted at all, though. That's certainly something I'm sure investigators are interested in. And then what we understand that they're focused on are these series of meetings in December, so in early December.
And you're talking, I just want to be clear, April 2016.
Yeah. April 2016, I'm sorry.
Right, so in the heat of the
April
campaign. I just want to be clear. Okay, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes, so then December 2016 is what they're really scrutinizing now, and that's a meeting that Jared Kushner has with Kislyak again, the ambassador, in early December. There's a follow-up meeting that doesn't involve Kushner himself, but he sends a top deputy, and then later that month he meets with the head of a Russian bank. We don't know exactly what that's about. The White House in the past has characterized these as routine kind of diplomatic meetings. You know, Kushner at that point, I guess you would call him a transition official, but that's what investigators are looking at. So
Matt, when you say he's being investigated because of the extent and nature of his interactions with the Russians, what is the significance of that? Because to your point, some of these meetings we have known about before. Kushner did not disclose them originally, but then he did. But they are now, at this time, knowing about them, investigating.
Yeah, that's right. I think the disclosure issues here are an important piece of this. They weren't disclosed in real time. They were disclosed later. Jared Kushner filled out a security clearance form, and our friends at the New York Times reported that he did not list these December meetings on that. His lawyer at the time suggested, well, this was an innocent oversight. He sought to clarify that, but that speaks to the sort of nature of these meetings. And also, I mean, look, at the time in December, the law enforcement community, the intelligence community was aware of Russian meddling in our election. So there was talk of sanctions in the air, and Jared Kushner is taking meetings with the Russians around then. That in and of itself is significant, though, as I said before. I mean, look, he's part of the incoming administration. He has a right to be a part of the new president's foreign policy.
All right, Matt, stay with me, please. I want to just bring in some others here to add to the discussion here about your breaking news. The former Republican presidential candidate and Senator Rick Santorum joined me, along with former senior advisor, communications director for President Obama, Dan Pfeiffer. Senator, let me give you a chance to react to this. Matt is here, obviously, with the Washington Post with his breaking news. Jared Kushner is now a focus in the Russia investigation.
Yeah, I guess my question is, I don't understand necessarily why that would be the case. I mean, if the Russia investigation is to look at Russians' influence in the election and the potential collaboration between the Trump campaign and the Russians, meetings in December don't really fit that bill very well, and so that doesn't seem to resonate with me. And the fact that someone in the Trump transition team is meeting with people from a foreign government, again, that's not an unusual thing, and doesn't really raise eyebrows with me. The other meeting that was mentioned in the discussion I just listened to was a meeting in April, and we're not even sure that they did meet. So I guess my question is, I'm not too sure I see a whole lot of meat there. Obviously the FBI is going to look into everything, but I don't see that necessarily as tying Jared Kushner to any kind of collusion with the Russians during the campaign.
Matt, let me give you a chance to respond, because you're talking about multiple meetings that they're looking at, including, of course, you did mention in December, are of high interest, but also last year.
Yeah, that's right. And I want to be clear that I am not here alleging that Jared Kushner coordinated with the Russians at the FBI, or that the special counsel, I guess now, is able to prove that. What we're reporting is that this is a subject that they are interested in. And look, I think you would also have to look at this in context. I mean, looking at the pre-election meetings and the post-election meetings, what they're looking at is, was there something they carried over? Was there coordination, and maybe was there something else afterwards? So it's not like the point at which Donald Trump is elected, the investigation necessarily has to stop. Of course, they would be interested in things on the campaign. I mean, what we're talking about here, the broad investigation is coordination to influence the election. But I would say it's not fair to say, well, they should just stop their work there. And we know that they are not just stopping their work there.
Yes, I mean, and that is, I think, important, Senator, right? But I want to give a chance here just to give immediately the response from Jared Kushner's attorney, Jamie Gorelick, has just come out with a response talking about some of these meetings that you're referring to, Matt, saying Mr. Kushner previously volunteered to share with Congress what he knows about these meetings. He will do the same if he is contacted in connection with any other inquiry. Dan, you've worked in a White House. You've been in an inner circle. How significant is this news? Jared Kushner now a focus in the Russia investigation when we're talking here about the FBI.
Well, look, we don't know, as Matt pointed out, what this means for what Jared Kushner actually did, but it's being looked at. And the closer the aide to the president, who is under investigation, is under scrutiny, the more debilitating the investigation is politically and substantively. We have to wait for the investigation to play out to see who did what, but the fact that they are zoning in on the person who, other than Ivanka, is the closest to Donald Trump is just going to make them feel the heat even more. And these meetings may be routine, we don't know, but it is not routine that Jared Kushner failed to disclose them, much like Attorney General Jeff Sessions failed to disclose his meetings. And so there is smoke there, and it'll be up to the FBI to figure out what actually happened.
I mean, Senator Santorum, I would imagine that you would concede that this is not good news.
No, it's certainly not good news that someone close to the president, obviously related to the president, is under investigation. But again, looking at the substance of what they seem to be looking into doesn't necessarily concern me as much. I mean, if those meetings were taking place, before the election, I would be much more concerned about, what was discussed at that point in time. But again, he had a role in the transition, and as you've seen, he has a very prominent role in in foreign affairs and national security. So again, that doesn't really raise suspicion in my mind. Obviously, it does in the FBI mind. We'll figure
Senator,
out
I guess
what
what I'm curious though, from your point of view, and especially now that there's a special counsel on this, originally it's looking at meddling in the election by the Russians and possible collusion, but it's very clear that that's going to bleed into. Was there, direct efforts that were allowed by members, close members to Donald Trump, that actually influenced U.S. policy in the transition and when he became president, right? So in that context, these meetings could be very important.
Well, I mean, again, the transition team is going to talk to other officials outside the government about a variety of different things, and I'm sure the Russians made their case about the sanctions and maybe had a year to do that. I don't necessarily see that as in 2 months they're going to be making those decisions. So hearing those discussions prior to being sworn in, I don't see as necessarily, again, unusual or warrant of FBI investigation.
So Matt, let me ask you though, because obviously Jared Kushner had these meetings. We knew about that. But they are now telling you are now finding out from sources that he is a focus in the Russia investigation. So does that mean then that his basic explanation for why those happened, which was it was routine and it was mundane, that they're not satisfied with that? I mean, isn't that definitional?
I think that's one thing that they have to scrutinize. I mean, Jamie Gorelick, his attorney, you brought up her statement earlier.
Yes.
She suggested he is willing to talk to them. He has not yet, obviously. He is also willing to talk to Senate investigators. He has not done that yet, but this is something they're scrutinizing. And I would go back, too, to the context of this. I mean, this early December meeting with Kislyak also involves Mike Flynn. Mike Flynn later has a conversation with Kislyak on the phone, discusses the sanctions, hides that fact from even the vice president. I mean, I think the FBI sees a lot of smoke there and wonders what is going on. And that's what we're reporting today, that the FBI is interested in that. Yes, we knew about that before, but I don't think that we knew the FBI was particularly interested in that and particularly interested in Mr. Kushner.
And Dan, what is the significance in the fact that there are sources now telling the Washington Post Jared Kushner is now focused in the Russia investigation, right? Specifically putting a name to it, not just someone close to the White House. Or as Matt's pointing out, he reported that a week ago. Now he's got a name.
Well, I think it's going to force the Trump administration to change their strategy here, because to date they have tried to push off the other people who have been indicated, whether it's Carter Page, who they say had a very small role in the campaign, or even Paul Manafort, who Sean Spicer in the White House tried to suggest had only had a brief role, who worked for a period of time for the Trump campaign, even though he was running it. And so, but you can't run and hide from this. And they are going to be forced to be answering these questions about the investigation into Kushner, what Kushner's role was, what was the substance of these meetings, are there other things he was involved in, what was his role in some of the questions around obstruction of justice, around the firing of Jim Comey, about asking Jim Comey to end the investigation into Flynn. All those questions are questions that the White House is going to have to face every day until this comes to an end, and it doesn't seem like it's going to come to an end anytime soon. So it's going to present a real challenge to just their simple day-to-day governing of that White House.
And Matt, do you have any understanding from your reporting as to the speed at which they are trying to move on this, given the significance of this development?
Yeah, we understand from our reporting last week that this investigation is really intensifying, that they had planned in the coming weeks, and they have already issued some subpoenas. We've reported on some of those related to Mike Flynn, that they plan to possibly conduct interviews here. I would say that the special counsel, Robert Mueller, just took this thing over, and certainly I would expect that he's now going to set the tone on this. It's hugely important, and I think they recognize that, and the speed at which they'll move, it will be sort of right in line with how important this is.
All right.
Aaron,
yes, go ahead,
just make
Senator.
one additional point, and that's the question you previously asked, which is, what's the FBI doing here? And the FBI is leaking information, tying someone close to the president, not really tying anything specifically, and even the reporter, suggesting whatever, we really don't know what they're doing, but they are doing something very deliberate here. They're leaking information about the president, someone very close to the president being under investigation, and if you look at the series of leaks that's come out, they're very much targeted and trying to destabilize this president. And this clearly is, we've heard reports, it will have an impact, and it won't be a positive one. So, I mean, there is that question as to what the FBI is trying to do here in trying to impact this president.
So it's a fair point to make, Senator, but I do, Matt, I want to give you a chance to respond, as I do every time this comes up, because the issue of leaks is serious. But you, as the reporter, you're getting this information from a source.
It's not the reporter's fault.
No. I'm not saying you're saying
fault.
that. I'm just trying to get Matt to say, what is the motive of the person sharing this with you, right? The senator and others who support the president are saying it's to destabilize this president and his presidency and his administration. What is your source's motive?
Well, look, I think the motive with a lot of these things is that the public deserves to know this, that the public should know if a top advisor to the president is a focus of the investigation. I just think that is important. So you can decry leaks, you can say, these are really bad people, but these are people who think the public deserves to know this, and frankly, so do I.
All right. Well, of course, I agree with you as well. I mean, as journalists. All right. Thank you all very much. And I want to go to the Democratic Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. He's out front with me here in New York. Sir, what's your reaction to this, to Matt's report? Jared Kushner now focused in the Russia investigation.
Well, there's a cloud of corruption that continues to hang over 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and the more we learn, the worse it gets for the president and for his administration. Clearly, there was something that was not right in terms of Russia's interference with our election. That was an established fact, and the possibility of collusion between high-level members of the Trump campaign and the Russians. And the question really is, was there cooperation, and what was exchanged as a result of that cooperation? Russia clearly interfered with the election by hacking into the DNC, hacking into the Clinton campaign. releasing those emails, timing those releases to a moment to maximize their impact, hurt the Clinton campaign, helped Donald Trump get elected. Was there a quid pro quo? Was there an exchange after the fact? And did the Kushner meetings fall into that category?
And that is the big question, because as Matt is saying, they aren't saying what they've discovered here. They're saying that they are focusing on him and they want to know more. But what we know, of course, is we know about meetings with the Russian bank. We know about multiple meetings with the Russian ambassador. We know some of these things were not originally disclosed on forms, and then later he came out and corrected that. They're not coming out and saying that there's some new smoking gun here. They're just saying they want to know more. He is a focus. So when you take those two things together, what do you think the significance is of this tonight?
Well, there's an ongoing criminal investigation, and clearly there's a lot of smoke here. The FBI is going through the process of determining whether there's fire, but there's no one who's closer to the president other than Ivanka than Jared Kushner, a senior advisor. And this is part of a pattern. Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, the Attorney General Jeff Sessions, the former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, all of these individuals are extremely close to the president. But in that group, no one closer than Jared Kushner. And the fact that he's a focus of the FBI and perhaps the special prosecutor's investigation is incredibly significant.
I mean, because this is, as Matt pointed out, obviously the closest person to the president thus far, and perhaps the closest person to the president, of course, other than his daughter, in that White House. Matt also was reporting in that interview that you all just saw that he says there's been an intensification in the investigation. This is something we have been talking about. Is that something that you have also seen, that you believe that it is actually intensifying at this time?
It does appear that things have been intensifying, and perhaps that's one of the reasons why the president has grown increasingly frustrated with the investigation. And that may have even led to his abrupt, inappropriate, undemocratic, and un-American dismissal of James Comey, because he is feeling the pressure. This will only intensify it further, and the hope is that we won't see evidence of abuse of presidential authority and obstruction of justice, as there is reason to believe that may have already occurred with the termination of James Comey and others.
Do you think at this point that the president has tried to engage in obstruction of justice through what he did to Jim Comey in his firing, and also, of course, asking him, as Jim Comey says, to stop the investigation into General Michael Flynn? Or is it possible that this is a president who is incredibly clueless about the way Washington works, felt that there was nothing to the investigation, it was bothering him, but there's nothing there, so why don't you stop it? Is there any way that you would buy that explanation for what he did?
Well, I do think the president is generally clueless, but he is the president of the United States of America. He's got experts all around him. He's got a White House counsel. He's got people to advise him. And it will be shocking for him not to conclude that terminating the FBI director who was leading the investigation into his campaign that had taken on a criminal nature and was publicly disclosed to the American people would not be inappropriate. It was clearly an erratic action. But it may be an indication of the actions of a desperate man.
And in terms of this information coming out, that Jared Kushner is named as a focus in the Russia investigation, how significant do you think that is, that someone was willing to put that out there? Is that just someone who's angry, or is this investigation hitting a whole new level?
Well, it may also indicate that there are law enforcement sources who are concerned that there may be an active effort to obstruct this investigation, to block it, to limit the ability of the American people to learn the facts. And that's why they're providing this information to the Fourth Estate, to journalists who can then communicate that information to the American people.
Congressman Jeffries, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you,
And next, more breaking news.